The world's top economies have all struggled to cope with the crippling effect of the COVID-19 virus on their respective economies. And in Japan, things are no different as the country follows suit and slumps into hard times as the industry there has grinded to a halt. With multiple factors affecting the Japanese economy, the chief of the Bank of Japan has stated that not only will the outcome dent the Japanese economy, but also that of its trading partners, which Japan relies on heavily for its exports.
Japan actually, are the largest and value added from the United States. So if U.S. demand shrinks sharply, it gives huge damage to Japanese economy. It also happened in the case in the global financial crisis in 2008 or 9, but this time the magnitude is much large. Now this time, this pandemic cut off supply chain networks of the Japanese multinationals with Asian countries, also cut off supply chain networks between China and the United States as well. So it possibly amplified the damage to the Japanese manufacturers.
On top of the traditional industrial and electronic sectors, Japan has also suffered from another financial blow in the form of the delaying of the 2020 Olympics. And it may cost the Japanese economy well in excess of $20 billion.
I think that, if the Olympic cancelled, it gives three different impacts. One is mental impact. Probably consumers' mental go back to that is the days of deflation, and possibly people reluctant to consume more. So it gives huge negative damage on the Japanese economy. The second is, of course, in fiscal problem, the fiscal burden getting increased. And the final one is, I think, probably real estate industry in Japan have huge damage from the cancelling of the Olympic Games.
Hello and welcome to Economic Divide with me, Kabita Atlai. In this week's edition of the show, we will take a look at how Japan, the world's third largest economy, is dealing with the impact of the financial crisis caused by the COVID-19. Don't forget, we want to hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you live in Japan? Has your business suffered? What is being done to help out? Let us know about this or any other story that you want to share with us by visiting our Twitter page using the marker ed_program. We can't wait to hear from you. Well, one of Japan's main sources of income is this lucrative factory output, which includes, amongst other things, one of the world's most important electronics industries. However, the impact of the COVID-19 virus on the world economy has seen production slip by 9.1%, the biggest drop since 2013. Contributing to the drop in overall sales was a diminished retail sales market, as consumers retracted from their usual purchases, with a drop of 13.7% in April, seeing the likes of clothing and vehicles taking the heaviest hits. Now, in order to try to resolve the problem for Japan, there are many things that need to be done. Well, the Japanese government has promised to inject a lifeline of $2.2 trillion, which includes 100,000 yen per citizen monthly subsidy to assist in the everyday lives of those who have either lost their jobs or have been placed on furlough.
It's arguably a toss-up between the FIFA World Cup and the Summer Olympics as to which is the most prestigious event for any nation to host. For Japan, the Summer Olympics in Tokyo would have been an ideal opportunity to show off its organisational skills and combine the enthusiasm of the Japanese fans with the experience of previously hosting the Rugby World Cup and the Winter Olympics in Nagano some years back. However, following some $12.6 billion of budget spent, and many claiming that the true figure is in fact double that amount, as the Japanese built their infrastructure for the Games, it now appears that simply by delaying the Games for 1 year, as it's been done, this will add a further $20 billion in loss of earnings. But it's not just the cost of the planning of the Games that will have a detrimental effect on the Japanese economy, for hosting such Games also brings with it multiple secondary problems. When Tokyo ousted Istanbul and Madrid to hold the Games, the industries relating to tourism and leisure in Japan gladly accepted the fact that following the Rugby World Cup in 2019, 2020 would also bring with it huge waves of tourists vying to see the Games. Each of these would seek accommodation in hotels, would need to eat, and of course spend much of their hard-earned cash on quirky Olympic souvenirs and Japanese goods. Naturally, the arrival of the COVID-19 virus soon put an end to the dreams of those that were planning on a bountiful summer in 2020.
Japan was prepared for the Olympics, but it was postponed. and even could be canceled next year. So obviously, this severe decline in inbound tourism and also related consumption. This is not just the negative impact of the postponement or cancellation of the Olympics, but overall impact of the pandemic.
What now remains to be seen is whether those relying on the income from the Olympics can weather the storm of it being delayed for a year, on top of the extra loss of business that they would naturally be missing out on due to the COVID-19 lockdowns.
It's not just industry that is suffering in Japan, as the workforce has also taken a hit. As things stand, Japan's jobless rates rose for the month of April by 2.6%, which, although quite bad, is a far cry from the 14.7% that the US has seen and the 7.7% rate that occurred in the EU. In spite of Japan slowly seeing things return to normal in terms of returning to work, the full impact of the economic crisis has yet to be felt there. But some economists are saying that when the reality of the financial drop does emerge, Japan could see its economy sink by as much as 20%. Well, the slump in Japan is the worst fall since 1955. However, the stimulus package promised accounts for some 40% of the total Japanese GDP, which means the chances of a long recovery period are high as the wheels take time to return to full motion. Now let's move over to one of Japan's largest industries, namely the automobile sector, which, as we saw last week on Economic Divide with Germany's car industry, is a vital source of income for Japan and one that sees us export vehicles across the globe.
Much like with the automobile industry in Germany being a major contributor to its economy, Japan also shares the same industrial backbone to its, and much like Germany, has three major players in the production of automobiles. In Japan, the so-called Big Three are Toyota, Nissan and Honda, all of which are highly sought-after brands, both within Japan and abroad, and bring in serious money for the Japanese economy, with Toyota being by far the largest producer of Japanese vehicles, with an annual turnover of $275.4 billion per year. In fact, taking Toyota on its own, it's this brand that holds the record for the best-selling vehicle of all time in the world, namely the Toyota Corolla, which since 1966, when it was first produced, to the present day, has seen Toyota produce in excess of 44 million units. However, much like almost every other industry in the world, the Japanese car industry has felt the pinch of the impact of the COVID-19 virus, which has seen Japan suffer a sharp drop in exports, as well as plant operating and producing hours, and of course, staff being reduced.
The production has been disrupted, especially because of what happened to in China. So we have seen the disruption in production, but also supply chain. And then currently the operating ratio of car production in Japan is just like 50% compared to before pandemic occurred.
Since the coronavirus took full effect, Japan has seen its automobile industry decrease by some 13% year on year, according to the Japanese Finance Ministry. Toyota, for example, has cut production by closing production in all 15 of its major factories each Friday, and has cut production down in other factories on other days to absorb the reduction in demand for sales. Nissan and Honda have also cut back on the production of their models, with Nissan cutting back 20% of their overall production, and Honda temporarily halting production altogether in 2 of their main plants. And Mazda, another Japanese company, is seeking a $2.8 billion government bailout in order to make ends meet. But the question is, will the Japanese car industry be the saving grace for the Japanese economy? And will the industry pick up again quickly once the COVID-19 crisis subsides?
Joining me in the studio today is Christopher Dent, a professor of economics and international business from Edge Hill University. For most of his professional career, he has studied the impact of the East Asia region, including China, Japan, and Korea, on the global economic system, especially with regards to trade and trade diplomacy. Well, Professor Dent, welcome to Economic Divide. It's good to have you with us.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Well, first up, with Japan being the world's 3rd largest economy and with the advantage of a healthy and well-established industrial sector. What will the recovery period look like for Japan, do you think?
Well, Japan is not only a very large economy, but it's also a very diversified one with many industrial and service sectors. And this gives it certain strengths when dealing with crises. So in answer to your question, the economic recovery period will depend largely on the response and actions of Japanese companies. And we tend to think of Japan as a high-tech economic powerhouse with robot operating factories, a society addicted to electronic gadgets, and big successful multinational companies like Toyota, Sony, and Honda. However, in the last 20 or 30 years, Japan's economy has only achieved low growth rates, averaging around 1 to 2% per year. Many business practices and sectors remained unreformed and unmodernized. And if you look closer, you will see many small and medium-sized companies that still depend on paper-based administration and fax machines. So such inefficient companies are likely to go bankrupt in Japan's deep coronavirus recession or be taken over by more efficient businesses.
Well, with not only the traditional economy suffering at the moment in that country, what do you think is going to be the economic impact of delaying or worse even canceling the Summer Olympics in that country, do you think?
Yes, the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics has been postponed, and all being well, it should take place in mid-2021. And the year delay has already proved economically costly for Japan. And it is quite possible that due to both social distancing and scheduling factors, that we could be looking at a significantly scaled down Olympic Games next year in Tokyo. Now, Japan has been trying to develop its tourism sector for a number of years and attract more foreign visitors to the country. And it was hoped that the Olympics would provide an important boost to Japan's economy and showcase the country to a wide global audience. And this delay could potentially jeopardize that. And if the Games are cancelled altogether, it could prove a major blow to various Japanese businesses.
Okay, and finally, will the $2.2 trillion bailout that's provided by the Japanese government have a long-term effect on the recovery, do you think, and future financial power of Japan once the crisis ends?
Well, that is a very difficult question to answer with any degree of certainty. It all depends on where the bailout assistance will be targeted. Now, Japan has sustained very high levels of government debt for many years now, and is currently standing at around 260% of GDP, which is the highest in the world and over twice the G7 economies average. And the country is already therefore fiscally committed to servicing that debt, and many economists believe that Japan will experience a sharp recession this year. But most major Japanese companies remain cash rich, and Japan's extremely low interest rates make credit very cheap. Furthermore, most investors view Japan as a safe long-term prospect. So the Japanese government still has good scope to orchestrate a strong long-term economic recovery.
Indeed. Thank you. Many thanks to Professor Christopher Dent from Edge Hill University. It was great to have you with us.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, Christopher Dent there from Edge Hill University. All right, coming up, we're going to take a quick break right now. We're going to look at plenty more regarding Japan, such as how the recession is affecting the everyday people of the nation, as well as looking into why an alarming rise in suicide rates is happening in that country because of the financial hard times. We're also going to be joined by a regular current affairs and impact analyst, Mahan Abedin, who will be running through some of the events making waves online. And finally, we'll be joined by Fazila Mubarak and Reinhard Nyandar, two activists from Kenya who are raising awareness of a construction site being planned on Nairobi's protected wildlife park, who was introduced to our show by one of our dear viewers, Saini Giba, a member of Extinction Rebellion in Gambia. So stick around, we've got so much more to share with you. Time now for our alternative view section. We've always encouraged you to get in touch with us at Economic Divide to share the stories that matter to you. Well, that's exactly what Saini Giba, a member of Extinction Rebellion in Gambia, did. Now, Saini introduced us to Fazila Mubarak and Reinhard Nyandar. an environmentalist and member of the Africa Sustainability Network, respectively, who wanted to share their story with us over what's happening in Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, and in particular, the beautiful Nairobi National Park. Let's hear their story. And don't forget, we're always open to hear about things that matter to you and what you want to share with us from around the world. So log on to our Twitter page, @ED_program, and let us know.
There are not many places in the world where you can enjoy the company of giraffes, black rhinos and lions as you overlook the skyscrapers and city skylines of a capital city. However, Nairobi National Park in Kenya is the exception to this rule. The pristine and protected land was declared a national park in 1946 and is located 7 kilometers south of the capital and is the only national park in the world to be located within the boundaries of a capital city. Furthermore, it contains 4 of the big 5 wild game, including the endangered and protected black rhino. However, things are taking a turn for the worse in the park, as not only has a transcontinental railway been built right through the middle of the land, which incidentally saw many people protest such a move, but now a new challenge poses a threat to the park, something that once again could upset the harmony and beauty of the setting.
So what's been happening is over the years there's been a lot of development that's been targeted at the park, and every time there's a chunk of the park that's being cut away and being used for development. And currently the situation is that they want to fence off the park, build more hotels in it, something that's really unnecessary in this time of climate change.
The impact is not only on the animals and beauty of the park, but also on the people that live there, including members of the Maasai community who live just adjacent to the national park. So why then is this particular piece of land being chosen to be built on?
Yes, so what you're seeing with the proposed development activities inside Nairobi National Park is for particularly vested interest, and why they normally choose, which is an upcoming precedence, the protected areas, is because there's no compensation, and ideally it's just impunity and corruption that is encroaching into matters of wildlife conservation.
Lobbying has taken place by various groups to stop the development of hotels and the destruction of the park. So what's been achieved by this so far?
The main thing we've done through the local mainstream media and some of the international media is to reach out to the Kenyan Republic. So what we've achieved, because they did the draft management plan in April and they put a deadline of 1 week for people to respond. And since the public participation was not properly or honestly conducted, we mobilized Kenyans to submit their comments to the ministry, and we did a lot of articles through the mainstream media, and this was postponed up to the end of June. So somehow we managed to mobilize Kenyans to respond.
If you want to find out more about what's happening to this wonderful land and want to help out, volunteer or raise awareness, here's how.
So we have the African Sustainability Network that's spearheading this campaign for Save Nairobi National Park. We have the Twitter social handles. There's Fazila Mubarak. We can also stay in touch. There's a hashtag Save Nairobi National Park. There's also a petition that you can sign and support the ongoing process, and put pressure on the government so that we don't want any developments that's going to harm the ecological system of the park. And you can also support us for the court processes that are ongoing right now.
Time to have Mahan Abedin, our current affairs and impact analyst, join us to tell us more about Japan. Japan's recession seems to be a very deep one that's going to persist for a while. At least that's the impression I'm getting.
Oh yes, I mean the COVID-related recession globally is a big issue, but certainly in relation to Japan because of its position in East Asia, its impact in the region and more broadly globally. And let's not forget, Japan still remains the 3rd largest economy in the world.
Why did you pick this particular post
Well,
here?
it's the entry ban to Japan that went on for several months and still applies to some extent. It's going to hit them big time. I mean, think about all those expats who live and work in Japan, the hundreds of thousands of English teachers and other workers who made Japan their home.
Okay, the next post here talks about the household spending.
Well, this I picked this one because it really speaks for itself. So a drop in household spending is indicative of a drop in basically a drop in the economy as a whole, spending power, so to speak, and that in turn reflects a broader.
Well, that's a big drop, 11.1%.
Huge, yeah, huge one, 11.1%. And again, as this tweet underlines, Japan remains the third largest economy in the world. So a drop of that magnitude is significant.
Okay, and your third and final post?
Well, this relates to the economic relationship between Japan and the EU, which is long-standing and a complex one. Just to give you one example, think about all the Japanese car plants in EU countries. The one in the UK, for instance, in Sunderland. And let's just imagine, Sunderland in the north of England, let's just imagine that these car plants either shut down because of problems in Japan, or the Japanese simply decide to take them somewhere else. It impacts the EU. It has a huge impact. And of course, we know that the EU countries themselves have suffered because of the coronavirus, the lockdowns. You know, it has been an unprecedented recession now, the worst one since the Second World War.
Very well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Mahan Abedin, our current affairs and impact analyst, with his thoughts on Japan's recession.
Japan has a very disciplined and dedicated work ethic, often seeing employees of companies working long and tiring hours in the offices and factories of Japan. Following World War II, Japan emerged as both an industrial and electronics powerhouse, which during the 1980s boomed as Japanese electronics firms reaped the benefits of modern technology, moving into the lives and homes of people from around the world, with the likes of Sony, Hitachi, JVC, Kenwood, Toshiba, and many more, all playing a part in the modernization of the everyday home. Japan also was, and continues to be, one of the leading manufacturers of computer gaming equipment, with the likes of Nintendo and Sony both dominating the global market and bringing in billions of dollars per year to Japan. In 2018, Japan's economy produced a respectable $5.6 trillion worth of goods, and with a population of 126 million people, has a gross domestic product per capita of $39,290, making it one of the best standards of living in Asia. But during tough times, there's a somewhat dark side to the people of Japan, who play their part in the Japanese economy. One of the main issues affecting people who are under financial and work pressure in Japan is suicide, or jisatsu, with the island nation seeing one of the highest suicide rates in the world. One of the worrying factors is that this act has a substantial cultural tolerance in Japan and sees some 71% of suicides performed by men. So just how demanding is the work ethic in Japan, and why does it lead to such heartbreaking acts?
I've spoken with Japanese people about this a lot, and they also find it very, very difficult to fathom out. I haven't come to any kind of concrete conclusions, but I've got some ideas, and I think one of them is because they have a high suicide rate among young people, children, teenagers. It's a lot to do with peer pressure, fitting in, academic success. But that pressure also carries on into the workplace as well with adults.
The arrival of the COVID-19 virus has surprisingly seen a decline in the number of suicides in Japan, with rates falling as much as 20% in April. It's highly likely that this decline has emerged as people who are often under pressure at work and difficult positions have used the lockdown to spend more time with their families, and hence seen the rates decrease as the pressure of the work-life balance eases.
When the top 5 economies in the world suffer, one can only question the consequences for those economies that lie further down the financial ladder. However, for the likes of Japan and others who have a strong financial, economic, and industrial spine, the rate at which they will recover is likely to be faster than others. Japan is, however, slightly unique in its current situation. The hosting of the Olympic Games would have brought in a huge financial boost to that country when one considers tourism, sponsorship, and football that would have contributed to the overall picture. However, in the end, it could end up costing Japan in excess of $20 billion for delaying the Games by 1 year. Don't forget, you can get in touch with us, our Twitter page, by visiting us on ED_program. You can also catch up with us in this episode and all our previous episodes by visiting our website. Details are on your screen now. That about does it for this episode of Economic Divide. I've been Kaveh Tafway, and on behalf of myself and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.